So it has been a long tradition here at TwinWest to bring you a session review program each year. So we're about a week ahead of schedule. So we were going to ask our panelists to tell us what happened. Now I think Tom Hauser will be asking them what will happen. So we'll get prognostications and we'll play back the tape and see how close they were. But this is going to give us a great opportunity to get an inside scoop on what's going to be happening at the Capitol over the next couple of days. So what are the potential outcomes of the session? Who will be the winners? Who will be the losers? Right now, the hot topic at the Capitol, it's all about the end of session negotiations. And so we've got a bonding bill still in play, business tax relief, education reform, Southwest Transit, and a Viking Stadium. So to help us skillfully navigate a discussion with a powerhouse panel today of speakers, I'd like to introduce our moderator this morning, Tom Hauser. Tom started at 5 Eyewitness News in September of 1992 after reporting and news anchoring jobs in Austin, Minnesota, Fort Myers, Florida, and Des Moines, Iowa. After covering the law enforcement beat in the Twin Cities for several years, Tom began covering Minnesota politics in 1997. He hosts the 5 Eyewitness News at Issue Public Affairs program on Sunday mornings, and in 2002, Tom authored Inside the Ropes with Jesse Ventura, a book about the remarkable 4-year term of Governor Jesse Ventura. In 1983, he received a bachelor's degree in journalism and political science from the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. And in 1992, he earned a master's degree in journalism and mass communications from Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. He's earned numerous awards for news reporting, including Emmy Awards for his coverage of the plane crash of Senator Paul Wellstone and for stories that helped solve the 1970 murder of St. Paul officer Jim Sackett. Tom has received 3 Emmy Awards for At Issue as the Best Public Affairs Program and 2 Emmys for television host of Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament on Channel 45. So please, and that's probably the most important thing you've ever done, right? That annual. So, so please join me in a very warm TwinWest welcome to Tom Hauser.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I heard Representative Carlson mention, the concept of legislative days. For those of you not quite familiar with that concept, I can put it into something you could understand, perhaps. Are you familiar with dog years? A legislative day is like 7 days to a human. So, just so you know, that's what a legislative day is. It's good to see that after 1 year, a year after we had the government shutdown and things went haywire, and I think the session went on until, in fact, is last year's session still going on? I'm not sure. They've all kind of blended together. But I'm glad to see that after the government shutdown last year and all the bad national publicity, that we've been able to overcome the disagreements and dysfunction this year. Highlighted, I thought, by the proposal the day after the session was supposed to be over for a whole new Vikings plan. You've heard the concept of an 11th hour proposal. That usually means it comes very late in the game. I'm not sure what you call a proposal that comes after the game is supposed to be over. So I've decided it was a millionth hour proposal. And the history of millionth hour proposals is not very good, I don't imagine. But as you know, that bonding proposal for the stadium is not going anywhere. And so now they're back to square one. And on Monday, the lawmakers you heard from will be debating that possibly endlessly on the House floor. So that'll be interesting. But without any further ado, let's get to our panelists, because we only have till about 9 o'clock to get through the thoughts of all of our panelists. And they all know what they're talking about because they live and breathe this stuff every day, and they're in the back of the room, most of them, and I will have them come up one at a time. Let's begin with Andy Brem. Why don't you come on up while I introduce you? He is an associate in the corporate group at Dorsey & Whitney. He focuses in the areas of mergers and acquisitions, securities law compliance, and corporate governance. Prior to joining Dorsey, Andy served as press secretary for Senator Norm Coleman in the Senate. Andy was recognized by Minnesota Business Magazine in 2009 as an emerging leader. When we need to be my age, it'll be a submerging leader, but that's... He contributes frequently to the Star Tribune opinion page, serves as a regular commentator on public affairs television program, something called At Issue, and Almanac, and has provided political analysis really for all the stations in town. Please, again, join me in welcoming Andy Brem. And Ben Golnick, if you will step forward, he regularly appears as a political analyst, also on At Issue, 10 o'clock Sunday mornings, by the way. He is often called on by the press corps to provide insight on political issues. In March 2011, Ben was selected for the 40 under 40 list by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal. Once you hit 40, then it's the 40 oh lordy list. So something for you to look forward to. In 2010, Ben served as the general consultant to the Minnesota Senate Republican Victory Fund. Ben helped engineer the campaign strategy that gave Republicans the first majority in 38 years and a net pickup of 16 seats, the most of any Senate caucus in the nation. In 2008, Ben served in a senior position for the McCain presidential campaign, overseeing activities in 6 states. He was also the lead political consultant to Minnesota House Republicans and served as a media liaison for Governor Tim Pawlenty during the presidential primary season. Again, welcome, Ben Golnick. Next up, Darren Broughton. Come on up, Darren. He is the director at Tunheim, a strategic communications firm where he focuses on public affairs and community relations. Prior to joining Tunheim in 2006, he served in for several years for Congressman Bill Luther, as well as worked in the Minnesota Senate, the Attorney General's office, and the Minnesota Environmental Partnership. He has also been a panelist. There's a theme developing here on At Issue, Almanac, and also on Fox 9. Again, please join me in welcoming Darren to the panel. And unfortunately, Dane Smith could not join us. Oh, no, Dane, I had breakfast with him just now. Dane Smith was named President of Growth and Justice in April 2007 after concluding a 30-year career as a journalist for the Star Tribune and Pioneer Press. Doesn't look old enough to have been there for 30 years. But he developed a solid reputation reporting and writing about state and local and federal government and politics. He succeeds founding executive director Joel Kramer, who is currently a member of the board of directors. Tax fairness and the issues surrounding government's proper role in society were among Dane's favorite issues as a reporter, and he has a particular expertise in those areas. He understands the importance of smart public sector investment that can help all Minnesotans improve their lives and strengthen the state's economy. Again, join me in welcoming Dane and all of our panelists this morning. I'm going to start by giving you each about a minute just to give me your summation of this, whether this is how you envision things going this session, or has this thing totally come off the rails. We heard one of the lawmakers talking about how this is one of the strangest sessions that they have seen. Andy, let me start with you.
Well, Tom, as you know, I predicted everything that's happened this session. I think to some extent it is predictable. I mean, we have a pretty left-leaning governor and an extremely conservative legislature, so the fact that they're able to come together on anything is a good thing. And this is the dynamic that the people of Minnesota sent to St. Paul last election. So it has been an interesting session, disappointing in a lot of ways, but not terribly surprising, I think, given the differences between the executive and legislative branch.
Now, Ben, you are largely responsible for this because you helped engineer the Senate takeover by Republicans. So, since you are responsible for this, explain yourself.
Well, as I'd say, elections have consequences, and I hear a lot of people grousing about conservatives. And look, people elected conservative majorities in both the Senate and the House. That's what we've seen. I think people talk about a do-nothing session. I think as conservatives, we like a minimal nothing session. I mean, we don't. What are a bunch of politicians in St. Paul going to get done? They're going to, try to raise taxes, spend more money, put more regulations in place. I think, what the Republicans have done is they've turned a $6 billion plus deficit into a surplus. They have joined with Governor Dayton on reducing some regulations, slowing the, speeding up the permitting process. I think those are some good things. Unfortunately, I think we've seen from Governor Dayton just a complete lack of willingness to compromise. I think, as Senator Bonoff mentioned, LAFO, this is just common sense education reform that has broad support. Unfortunately, Governor Dayton, listened to the education union and decided to veto that yesterday. So very disappointing to see that. from Governor Dayton. I think Republicans in the legislature have accomplished a number of solid, as we mentioned, those reforms. The tax bill, I think, is going to help the business community immensely. The Viking Stadium, obviously, is much talked about, but I think in my political work, I help Chuck Kravac in northern Minnesota, also Mike Perry for Congress in southern Minnesota. The Viking Stadium just really isn't on the radar out in greater Minnesota, and I just put that out there. I know it's talked about and it's in the news and is on KFAN and Sports Talk Radio, but I think the average people are kind of like, okay, well, here's the Viking Stadium. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from a political perspective, but I don't think statewide that's got that much juice. But the last thing I'll just say is, the legislative process is like making sausage, and it's never pretty, so I think we're always kind of at the same spot here, and the next week will be really interesting to see how it plays out and which side gets credit. I think a lot of this stuff is such inside baseball, pardon the pun, that I don't know how much it's going to move the needle in the November elections, but it'll be interesting to see.
All right, thanks, Ben. Although on that note, we do need to keep in mind that 4 million of the state's 5 million people are in roughly the metro area as opposed to outstate. But it's clearly going to be a big issue. Darren, is this really any different than? Is this really any different than what we saw when Governor Pawlenty was the Republican governor and you had Democrats controlling the legislature?
No, I think this is actually I would say it is very different. I have friends that told me that no one watches soap operas anymore, and that's why all the networks are pulling them. No one has told that to the legislature. Because we started this legislative session dealing with a sex scandal that just kind of keeps unraveling and unraveling. We do a spin-off on the Viking Stadium and all that drama. This legislative session, I think, is fair to say it has been bizarre because how it has started. And it has been bizarre because we've done nothing for basically the first 4 months that they've been there. And now we're coming to crunch time, and we're looking at, and use a football analogy since we're talking about Vikings at some point today, very bad clock management. And now we're sitting here and we have 3 or 4 legislative days left that we need to get done a bonding bill, which there doesn't seem to be a clear path forward to pass. We need to finish a Viking Stadium. There doesn't seem to be a very clear path to pass. Get some, hopefully some tax reform pieces done. Hopefully get some policy reform pieces done. And here we're sitting here with no path forward. And so I think, this is not a partisan comment. If I was a voter out there, I would throw all the bums out because this has just been a horrible, horrible legislative session.
Some of those bums are in the room, but be careful. So on behalf of Darren, I apologize to each and every one of you. When I say that out loud into the microphone, now, and keep in mind, Dane, as we go to you, remember, Darren, that 5 legislative days means we really have 35 days left. So a lot of time to get this done. Dane?
Yeah, in a phrase, not pretty, but better than I expected, actually. See, my glass is half full. In preparing for this, I dusted off my TwinWest 2010 session review, and I'm just going to read that script. It's actually the same. We have a governor of one party, as Andy pointed out, a legislature controlled entirely by the other party. They may be more ideologically farther apart than ever before. They have very different ideas about what it takes to solve problems and to preserve our great quality of life in this state and to preserve our prosperity, and yet nothing much got done. In 2010 and 11, we kicked the can down the road, and I think Ben agrees with my friend and adversary Phil Krinke, who argues that doing absolutely nothing is a victory for those hardcore anti-government absolutists who favor absolute minimal activity by our public sector, which I often describe as our pretty darn good Minnesota government. And I don't think it's a victory if we fail to solve problems and provide public investments that are essential to business growth. And this TwinWest chamber is to be complimented for its ability to recognize what those investments are and to put them into your agenda. And it won't And so I don't think this will be a victory if our leaders fail to come through eventually soon on a TwinWest agenda that includes the hugely important taxpayer investment in Southwest Light Rail, that at least a compromise on improving teacher quality. The LIFO direction is the right direction. If we fail to provide new and improved investments in early childhood education, Art Rolnick is here in the room, and we know what a champion he's been here. And TwinWest is really intelligently out front on that issue. And then we have to close these unacceptable job skill gaps that are opening up by race and income. Absolutely essential to long-term growth. So these investments are explicit or implied in your agenda. And I think actually there was some progress. I just want to quickly touch on them. There was one of the things that you opposed, and I salute you for this, is taking a position against these arbitrary and unworkable constitutional budget amendments. This took some courage on your part, I know. And those things died. I thought certain going into this session that we would see a crazy constitutional amendment that required a 60% supermajority for any kind of tax or revenue increase. The business-friendly Minnesota Taxpayers Association weighed in against these, noted that these inflexible amendments would make a tax overhaul virtually impossible. And so this irresponsible and intelligent decision, that word got out, and that thing died a quiet death in this legislature. So a lot of times stuff that doesn't happen has to be reported as progress. And we had some unsung victories.
Well, in that case, this legislature is going to get high grades. So
I'm telling you, half full. The happy little parties have actually been breaking out the last few days in the governor's reception room, accord over human services, some health care accord, and I'd like to highlight something we really worked hard on with business, and that's expansion of post-secondary enrollment options to 10th graders, allowing them to seek vocational training to get on that track early. We know how important it is to keep them in school, and that will put more kids into that practical job skill training track. And the education bill signed this week includes a promising pilot project on early childhood education visits to homes. So I've covered sessions for 30 years. At this stage, they're always train wrecks. They always look like the worst ever, and I just don't think it is.
all right, thank you, Dan. Let's start with the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The Viking Stadium is going to be up finally for an up or down vote on the House floor. Ben Golnick, it seems to me that the heaviest lifting Governor Dayton's going to have to do if he wants to get votes for this is in the Republican caucus. How difficult will it be for him to get to, let's say they need 34 votes from Republicans? Is that even possible?
I think it's possible. I think it can be a challenge for both parties. I know Majority Leader Deason said that he's got 34 votes. I think we could ask some of the DFLers in here, but I think that might be a stretch to get to those 34. The St. Paul delegation of DFLers, I don't think they're necessarily very pleased with this bill. I will say that I think over the last 24 or 48 hours, I don't think it's helpful when you have Governor Dayton and his staff out there making this very personal, attacking Speaker Zellers. It's not helpful. I think it's below the office of governor when you're out there. You know, this is all on Speaker Zeller's shoulders. I've heard that a lot from them. You've got Mark Dayton, Governor Dayton, doing a tour on Sports Talk Radio today. If you really wanted to get a deal done, why not work behind the scenes? We saw Governor Plenty did that, I think, expertly, was not out there taking partisan political shots. And I think we'd be better served as a state and to get this done. If people really want us to get this done, let's let Governor Dayton work behind the scenes, try to pull some Republicans and Democrats on board.
Well, Darren, the governor was upset because this brand new proposal came from out of nowhere that the House Republicans were working on, apparently with the Vikings, with the governor completely out of the loop. Was he justified in being angry, or did he overblow that?
No, I think he's justified. I think, let's be clear, of the four legislative leaders, Speaker Zellers has been the weakest link this whole legislative session during the Viking Stadium. And I think the most telling comment was earlier, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where the speaker said, well, I hope it passes, but I'm not going to vote for it. Well, It sounds like a couple of presidential candidates the last couple cycles. I voted for it before I voted against it. And so I think, it takes leadership, and while the speaker can be, great, he wants to take the position, he's going to vote against it. It is his House of Representatives. He is accountable to the voters at what happens. And so if a Vikings bill fails in the House, it is his responsibility.
And Andy, let me go to you on that. I did hear Speaker Zeller say that not once but twice yesterday on talk radio, on KFAN with Dan Barrero and again with Mike Max last night. And it did strike me as kind of odd that he says that he's not going to vote for it, but he really hopes it passes. That seems totally counterintuitive, because if you vote against it, that must mean you find it something egregiously wrong with it. So why would you want it to pass?
Well, if I was Speaker Zeller's press secretary, I'd probably change his talking points a little bit on that one. But I think I can respect the difficult position that he is in. I mean, he represents a caucus that ran on really two fundamental promises: to cut spending and not to raise taxes. And this bill is out of step with that. And so I think what Governor Dayton needs to do a better job of, and what the Vikings, I think, need to do a better job of, is to explain why, not just that, well, if we don't do this, they're going to leave. Minnesotans don't react well to threats. I think the better thing is to try to come out to, this is why this is a good investment, this is a good use of tax dollars, this is a legitimate revenue source. Those are very tough questions, and as Ben said, there are a lot of people in Minnesota that aren't signed up to this. So I think that the governor and the Vikings have not done a good job of trying to sell kind of the philosophical reasons behind why this is a good idea. They've said it's pragmatic. They've said we need to do it, otherwise they'll leave. But I think in that messaging, it's been disappointing from the governor and the Vikings.
Dane, this morning on the way in, Sid Hartman had gone to Stadium on 5. I think he was helping the Vikings pack their duffel bags this morning while he was talking to Dave Lee. If this stadium bill does not pass on Monday, and nothing happens this session, what happens from there? We went through this once, and I know you were there when the Twins were shot down in a special session, I think in 97 or 98. I remember people were up in the gallery crying because they thought the Twins were leaving.
Right, they were going to North Carolina.
They were going to all kinds of places.
Right.
8 years later, they finally got a stadium. Could we see that same scenario play out here, or is this a little bit different, given the fact that the Metrodome is a much older building now, and their lease is up, and the NFL might be a little more powerful?
You know, I'm not even all that interested in the Viking Stadium. I haven't been following it that closely. I agree with Art Rolnick that it's about the next to last important investment that we can make in this state. It's a fairly minor employer, actually. And if the new court assault on these head injuries comes through, we're going to be watching NFL football, basically two-hand touch, I think, here pretty soon. So.
Or flag football, that would be fun. Yeah.
But that being said, I do think everything I've read suggests that NFL teams are much more footloose, and they must have convinced the governor that they will, in fact, be gone if they don't get the stadium. So I suppose there are some public benefits to a stadium. There's construction jobs. Construction's hurting badly in this state. It's finally recovering, by the way. And the good news is, as many people in this room know, manufacturing, housing, and other sectors are beginning to come back. And so the consequences of the session's inaction are probably less serious than when we're in a free fall. But I do think the stadium bill will pass. I think it'll be part of a final global agreement. It's just sort of a spidey sense around it.
And last word on this, just one word answer. I know where he stands. He thinks it'll pass. Just yes or no. Will a stadium pass this session, Darren? One word. Remember I said one word.
Maybe.
And that wasn't one of the words I gave you the option of saying.
Yes.
Ben?
I'll say no.
I think no.
All right. Well, we're tied 2-2. Boy, this is a shock on this issue. What is it? Tie, you die? Isn't that how that works? Let's move on to the tax bill. It was interesting. I heard Senator Bonoff saying maybe that's an interesting place to begin finding some compromise. There are some things in there like the tax credits for businesses that hire veterans. That is something Governor Dayton had sought. So, you know, Republicans did throw him a bone on that. There's some other things that I think he could like. But, Darren, why is he likely to veto that? And do you think that's a wise idea?
Well, I think he's likely to veto it because the governor really wants to spend 2013 to do comprehensive tax reform. And I know for business, the one thing you ask for is consistency from government. And if the state goes through and changes tax codes, and guess what, 9 months from now, we change it back, or we do something else, it doesn't really help you in your bottom line. So I think the governor has a couple of things he'd like to get done. The veterans piece is one of them. I know the governor's interested in the Amazon piece. Obviously, that raises a little revenue, which, you know, the Republicans and legislature's not really interested in more money. They can give me a little more of it, I guess. But I think, well, you know, there is an opportunity to do some compromising on the tax bill, but I don't think, you know, as Representative Benson said, we do have a $3 billion deficit coming back to in January, and making that hole a little larger is not helpful for anyone.
Dane, we have heard enough time passing tepid tax reform, let alone comprehensive tax reform. Is it a good idea to try to wait and do it all at once? We all know how difficult that is whenever you try to make changes in the tax code.
Right. I definitely think it's best to wait for a total comprehensive overhaul, something that business interests across this state desperately need. We need a tax code for the new economy. Governor Pawlenty put together a very plausible proposal. His 21st Century Tax Reform Commission of a few years ago came up with a proposal that Growth and Justice agrees with. We need to cut some business tax cut rates, but need to come up with a system that produces more stable revenue for the good public investments we need to continue in our education system, our transportation, light rail, which is going to be an important part to this center of prosperity here in southwestern Metro. So, yeah, it's got to be a big package, and it's possible. We've done it in the past. We can do it again. We probably need to restore some of the income tax rates that we had in the 90s, which were great for business people. So, yes, we need to cut business taxes, but it's got to be part of a bigger deal, a grand bargain.
Ben Bullock, do you think the governor is a sure thing he's going to veto the tax bill?
Well, I think so, absolutely. If we saw it, you know, yesterday, vetoing LIFO, which is the education reform, I think the only chance it has to pass if you get Tom Dewar and Education Minnesota to come out in favor of it, and maybe Governor Dayton would then support it, but I think it's very unlikely that he'll do that.
I think that was a shot at Tom Dewar.
Sorry.
If you were still waking up this
I
morning.
moved off.
Yeah. Andy?
I think he will veto it, and I think there's just no excuse. I mean, Minnesota's tax policy is an emergency. The National Tax Institute rates Minnesota in terms of its corporate tax structure 47th of the 50 states in terms of its friendliness towards business. This is a real problem, especially when our neighboring states like South Dakota are ranked in the top 10. So if we're going to be competitive, we have to sit down and get stuff done on this. I think it's just an excuse on Governor Dayton's part to say that he wants something more comprehensive. It is very difficult to get anything done in this environment. Let's take a couple steps forward. But I think one of the reasons he also wants to wait is because he's expressed that he wants to raise taxes on people in the state. And he wants to include that as part of his legislation that obviously won't pass muster with legislature. But that absolutely has to be off the table. Minnesota is a very, very high tax state. It's not friendly to business, and we have some serious work to do. I think this is the #1 priority in the legislature right now because we will not be competitive if we keep this up.
Well, we're not a very, very high tax state. We rank around 20th to 30th on total taxes as a percent of the economy. And it's just, I mean, the consensus on this by the experts is pretty clear, including our own revenue department, who served Pawlenty, and the current governor, who says that we have become an average state in taxes.
Maybe we can ask all the business folks in here who thinks we're overtaxed or undertaxed. I mean, I always make that joke. If you think you're undertaxed for, you know, the Buffett rules come out, you know, these folks can write a check to the U.S. Treasury if they think they're undertaxed. And if anyone here, you know, feels that they're undertaxed, I don't think we'd find one person. So I think that's the only focus group we need to hold.
It's important to know what people think, but it's important to look at the data.
I have looked at the data. And Minnesota, the National Tax Institute, which is a good authority on this, ranks Minnesota, I think 13th. We used to be in the top 10. Thank goodness for Governor Poloni. He got us out of that Hall of Fame. But we still are in the top teens in terms of tax rate. The tax burden for the average Minnesotan is higher than the average state tax burden. So we are out of whack on this issue, and that is the data.
Darren?
Can I just say, I think all these, the studies and the rankings, you can slice data 90,000 different ways and make it say whatever you want it to say. The case in point, yesterday, Chief Executive Magazine came out. It surveyed all CEOs across the country. Minnesota dropped from, I think it was 29 to 36 in business condition in the last year. Tell me what happened last year that made us become less competitive. Because we didn't do it. Because the legislature didn't do anything. The legislature didn't raise any taxes. So, I mean, these surveys, these rankings, they're all bogus. We can make data say whatever we want it to say.
Speaking of Mark Dayton, yesterday, Greg Davids, the House Tax Committee Chair, said something I thought rather extraordinary down in the Capitol Press Corps. He said, and I'll throw this at you, he goes, if the governor were to sign this tax bill, I think you would find a lot more Republicans who would be inclined to vote for the Viking Stadium bill. The governor has made it clear he doesn't want to do any horse trading, tax bill for a Vikings bill, but could you see a scenario like that playing out?
Sure, I could. And I don't think the size of this tax hole, this budget hole that's created by the tax cut is all that significant. What is it, 150 billion?
Yeah.
That's on a $32 billion biennial budget. That's not much. And so I think a deal is possible. And I just wanted to point out that there are Forbes magazine and lots and lots and lots of other business media, business consultants, economists rate Minnesota as a great place to do business, one of the very best in the nation. And that's just, I think, irrefutable.
Ben, Greg Davis was also saying yesterday that the tax increment financing district that they would expand, I think, around the Mall of America and some other changes, they claim would create a lot of jobs. In fact, more jobs than the bonding bill and the Viking Stadium that the governor is pushing for. Can we ever believe, and maybe we should ask our Olnick this, but can you ever believe these job creation numbers that people throw around? It's kind of like yes, kind of like throwing around the numbers on are we 20th or are we 36th? When you say a stadium's going to create X number of jobs or a bonding bill's going to create X number of jobs, can anybody actually say with any certainty that any jobs are created?
I can't. Darren's kind of refuted all of them, so I defer to him on any of those numbers. I think, the last time we saw a lot of money spent was President Obama's failed stimulus plan. I know that was referenced earlier. That certainly didn't provide what people thought it was going to provide, and I'm not an economist, nor do I play one on cable access TV. So I don't know. I think the argument that I saw Speaker Zeller's made that at the end of his press conference yesterday, that would be more jobs. I think that the reality is that with the legislature, as Andy said, this is probably the most conservative majority we've ever had in Minnesota, and with Governor Dayton being one of the more liberal governors, there is a huge gulf there between the two sides. It's going to be challenging, but I do think that Governor Dayton has some opportunities to pull them across. But there's just no way on some of these things. I mean, to Dane's point, Republicans aren't going to support tax increases. It's dead on arrival. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Didn't happen last session. I think that's good for the state that it didn't happen. So we'll have to find ways to compromise. I think the tax reform is doable, and we'll see on the Viking Stadium. It's going to be interesting to see if either side can put up 34 votes here on Monday when they have the vote.
Let's shift to the bonding bill, Andy, and as you heard, one of the priorities of the TwinWest Chamber and other business groups is Southwest Rail. Republicans have been against light rail really from the beginning. Why does there continue to be this resistance, even though business groups that generally support Republicans seem to be on board?
Again, I just think that there needs to be a stronger pitch to Republicans as to why it's expensive infrastructure, and the state's pretty much broke right now. And so I think that, again, you need to communicate as to why that infrastructure investment is really necessary, why it's worth the money. Because I think a lot of people say, well, you have to do it because you're going to get money then from Washington. And conservatives don't like that. So I think you just have to communicate it differently. I think there's no question that we have to be investing in infrastructure in the state. That is a key component to being competitive. Too. But again, I think it's going to take some messaging from business folks, you know, to those people that ran on that platform to say, here's why this makes sense.
Dane, back in the days when the state was awash in budget surpluses, Republicans made the same argument against light rail. So I don't know that it has anything to do with whether or not we have a deficit or not.
Well, Governor Pawlenty flipped on light rail just as his '02 campaign was unfolding, and he was a supporter of it. So there is strong Republican support for transportation infrastructure. Growth and Justice stood with the business lobby in 2008 after the bridge collapsed in favor of a major new package of revenue that improved our roads and highways as well as transit. So this is a no-brainer for business, and they get it, they understand it. And as I said before, I applaud TwinWest Chamber for standing up for light rail. This will connect the Opus area with downtown. It's just going to be a tremendous boon to this region, which really is, as I described it, the center of prosperity in Minnesota. And we need to keep investing in that infrastructure. And it's not a monolithic Republican position to be against this at all. It is simply the position of the anti-tax absolutists.
Ben, we don't know what the size of the bonding bill is going to be, with or without light rail, but any idea of what kind of a compromise number they might come up with?
It seems like it's right under $500 million. I guess that's the number that I've heard, you know, 495 million. To the light rail point, I mean, I think there is some empirical data we can look at. Look at the North Star rail line, North Metro. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think studies have shown that it's subsidized to the tune of like $60 per rider. I mean, I think it was one of the think tanks did a little video where they got on the line and there was like 12 people riding it in the morning. So not to say that'd be the same for Southwest Rail. I know this is not a popular position that, you know, that I'm against light rail here in this room, but we've got to look at the data. And if North Star Rail is being subsidized $60 a rider, let's put more lanes in. Let's get, you know, buses. Let's improve our you know, infrastructure there. I live in St. Paul, so I contend with the light rail construction. It used to be like KSDP there, but, you know, it's ridiculous. And now I've heard that it's going to take, what, 50 minutes to get from downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis, and I could bike or ride a skateboard, you know, in a faster amount of time, or you know, whatever. So I just think we need to do a cost benefit on this stuff. But up to me, I'd say we'd have more. You know, let's improve our existing infrastructure rather than spending money on light rail.
Do you promise to alert the media when you skateboard from Minneapolis to St. Paul? Because we would like to cover that.
Well, it did impact me. I normally it's about 5 minutes from my house to KFC, and my wife's a pediatrician and hates that I go to KFC. But I went there the other day, and it must have taken me 25 minutes to get from my house near Grand and Lexington and St. Paul over to University Avenue to get my KFC. So that light rail has really become a personal issue and hindrance for me.
Wow, I didn't mean to get into marital politics here. Well, as long as you brought it up. No. Andy, the bonding bill, how is this going to fit into the endgame strategy between the tax bill, the stadium, and that? Those seem to be the three legs of the stool that they're trying to balance right now.
Right, the big question is how Ben stays so skinny and goes to KFC all the time. But
skateboarding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, it's hard to say. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be some compromise. Both sides want to see a bonding bill. Obviously, the governor and the legislature are a little far apart in terms of how much to spend. But we'll see. It might become part of a compromising tool on the tax bill for the governor to use that. Who knows? Based on what we've seen in the session, it's pretty hard to make predictions like that. But, you know, it's certainly in play.
Darren, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah. I think there's a couple misnomers. One, I think comparing Southwest North Star is like comparing apples and oranges. Two, light rail operational costs is significantly less than the cost of maintaining buses. And so we like to throw out the big numbers. Oh my gosh, it's going to cost us $1 billion or something like that. Guess what? It's cheaper in the long run, which as business, we understand there are short-term costs and long-term costs. The long-term costs are significantly less. The other thing on the bonding bill, which I actually think is the saddest piece, is that our state capital is crumbling every day. And I'm actually disappointed. I was disappointed earlier a couple weeks ago when the House failed to pass it by one vote that ensured that this capital got $220 or $240 million investment. This bonding bill looks like it's only going to be a $44 million investment. Our state capital should transcend all politics. It is a crown jewel, and I think it is horrible that the legislature cannot find a way to put adequate money to save our state capital.
I just wanted to point out that in more conservative states, in more conservative metropolitan areas, in fact, where conservative business leadership has considerable influence, light rail is building out like crazy. In Dallas, a place like Salt Lake City, Denver, of course, is way ahead of us, and I just think you should look at what people do and not what they say.
Last thing, because we're running out of time, just real quick, on last in, first out legislation that the governor vetoed. Darren, ultimately, was that a mistake, do you think, since it did have a lot of bipartisan support?
I think most people, including the governor in the camp, believes there needs to be some sort of reform of teacher tenure. I don't think I think he has concerns about the bill. I think he wishes that there have been more cooperation on it. I think I think one of the challenges or an opportunity could be coming back in 2013 is to do as a test pilot in 10 or 12 districts, because it is a significant change in state policy. So I think the governor's open and willing to talk about something, but just doing it as a uniform blanket policy that's something we've never done before has lots of ramifications.
Andy?
Well, we have done it.
Hello? Oh, all right, sorry. Well, Darren, we have done it before, and that's called the private sector. When employees are fired based on the merits of their performance. I mean, this is not some kind of broad experiment. I mean, it's absolutely critical. And when this governor wants to put more money into education, I don't know how he can make that case with a straight face when this is the way our public schools run. It's a disservice to our children. I think it's a disservice to public administrators. And it's just basic common sense. We shouldn't have good teachers being fired because there's bad teachers with more seniority. That's not the way any good business runs. So the idea that it's unfortunate there wasn't more cooperation. I'm not sure what that means. But I think that the idea that this is experimental is done every single day in every business around the state.
Ben?
Yeah, I agree with Andy. I mean, I think it's disappointing. I think Senator Bonoff, she had made a point of supporting this. There was a lot of bipartisan support. But I think in the last days, and maybe it's because it's the end of session and things have gotten so heated, but there was a very common sense bill. It was to address redistricting, and the League of Women Voters were supportive of that. Governor Dayton vetoed that. So I don't know if it's just feeling that things are so partisan that he's going to veto anything that might be seen as a Republican victory. I think it's unfortunate, and it's really, really too bad.
And Dane, last quick word on this. On LIFO. Do we wake you up over there, Dane? 30 years at the Star Tribune must have worn you out.
Tom, everybody else here gets invited on your TV show, except
Well, Dana, our segments are only 6 minutes long, so.
right. You wouldn't want anybody who's actually prepared.
Folks, in case you're not paying attention, this is the complaints part of the program now. So,
LIFO, I think it's a great concept. It's a good idea. I think it went too far to completely remove seniority. And many districts were moving in this direction anyway. So I'm kind of like 50-50 on the governor's veto. A lot of people I respect were for it. A lot of people I respect were against it. And as Hubert Humphrey said, some of my friends are against this, some of my friends are for it, and I'm for my friends.
And on that note, let's have a round of applause for our panelists today. And I will invite Danette back up to complete the program. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and a great weekend, and it should be fun on Monday. Thank you.
Okay, just quickly here, I just have one announcement. First of all, thank you again very much, our panel. You guys are great. Thank you. Appreciate it. I also want to thank our legislators for being with us here today. Commissioner Stenglein, very much. And don't forget to reserve your seat for the May 24th TwinWest Small Business Awards Luncheon, where we will be celebrating our Entrepreneur of the Year and Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year, the finalists and the winners. And you can go online at TwinWest to reserve your spot. And also, I want to thank all of our sponsors. Thank you so much for that. And last of all, we'll see you on June 8th, where we will have the political party chairs here to talk about the upcoming elections. Everybody have a fabulous day and a better weekend.